Aloha. Good morning. It's a beautiful Saturday here on the Big Island of Hawaii. It is 9:17 a.m. And one of the things that I think and feel and discuss a lot is about emotion and exactly what is emotion and how to better understand emotion. Um, the first part of understanding emotion is to understand how it flows in our body. Emotions are feelings, and feelings aren't just this like humanistic thing that we see with like red hearts, like pasted around and things like that. Feeling is the navigational guidance of the human. It literally affects the human vessel. When we feel energy, we're charged up in our physical body to affect the emotional body, which then triggers the subconscious into the conscious mind. So emotions, the feeling that we receive in our body, is the guidance, how we can better understand ourselves and other people. And so when we realize that everything is energy and we're constantly sending and receiving energy, and that means from other people, when we step into someone's auric field, our electrons of our molecular structure will literally work to balance themselves out with that other person because we're in a gravitational field here on the planet Earth. And so that's why sometimes being around certain people, you can really feel exhausted afterwards. And it's literally down to a molecular level in the feeling of the electrons and the amount of neurotransmitters that are being produced, whether someone is actually pulling more energy from you or you're pulling more energy from them. It's all based on the balance of the emotional self, the feeling. And so when we realize that emotion, which is the feeling in the body, actually our thoughts program the body. So our past experiences from when we were childhood and then into adulthood, all of those experiences literally program the body on a chemical level as a response system. That's why a lot of people will talk about how they feel anxiety. And anxiety can come in a couple of different ways. I call it a running sensation in the solar plexus. I remove the word anxiety because I don't have anxiety. I have energy fields. And so when I feel that energy running in my solar plexus, I realize that that's a gauge for me to slow down and take a look versus going off into my psyche thinking, oh, I have anxiety, and then attaching a story to it, which then becomes programmed in the body to be on repeat later. Because the mind, the subconscious mind, is what I call the mind file. It gets programmed by all of our life experiences. It gets programmed by everything we think on the inside of our mind and everything that we absorb on the outside and what we agree to. And the programming of emotion starts from when we're very young. It goes back to when we're children. In the womb, we are paying attention. And whether we believe it or not, our cells are absorbing and listening to everything that's going on. And so, say a mother that didn't want a child can come into the world feeling that sense of loss right away. And so it's interesting to see how it can go back, like the feelings of abandonment can go way back, way beyond things that we can even remember. So it's not necessarily about finding out why we feel something. It's more or less that we are feeling something and how to transmit that energy into a higher vibration. It's a choice of recognition, becoming consciously aware of the feeling that then triggers the thought process to then be able to rewrite the program, to create and manifest the realities that are really already coming through. We just have to move that emotional baggage, that thought baggage out of the way so that we can authentically hear what's coming through. For instance, one of the things that I was thinking about the other day that I was just speaking with someone about yesterday is the I told you so. Now, when we are children and we're seeking everything on the outside and we're just so blissful and playing and we don't attach to all this humanistic stuff, we are still being programmed by it. And so when a parent tells a child, when a child asks a question, I told you so, that's not a definite direction. That doesn't give the child's mind the programming it needs so that it can store it to make better decisions, or to make aligned decisions, or even just thoughtful decisions later. When telling a child, when they ask a question, because I say so, that doesn't give the emotional compass the direction to gauge. And so therefore they don't understand what they're supposed to do with themselves. And it's no different as an adult. And so taking the time to explain to children and adults why we feel what we feel and say and do what we do when it feels appropriate is really important, because that gives information, and knowledge is power, and then it can transmute into wisdom. Knowledge activates wisdom within the thought mind process to then gauge the emotional response. And so, so when we can recognize that the programming begins from a very, very, very early age, we can start to understand more of our emotions. Now, there are some people that say that they don't feel emotion, that they're not attached and they're not in tune with their emotions. And that's simply not true. It's a matter of recognizing that the emotion is always there. No one is blocked from anything other than what they perceive. And so if someone isn't feeling emotion, if someone isn't feeling anger, if someone isn't feeling happiness, that just means that their perception has shifted from the realization that there is a feeling there. If someone says, oh, I get so frustrated because I can't feel anything, well, the frustration is the feeling. We attach and agree to these programs of what we see other people going through, what we hear other people saying. And really, it's all about the internal program of each individual person. Just because someone says, oh, I don't know how to love, or I don't know what love is, that's really not true, because it's our innate nature. We simply have to shift our perception to take a look inside to realize that love is there. When we move from this space and go into this space, that's where the divine hearing comes from. And we're able to switch the frequency of the channel, because everything is a channel. Everything is information stored that is either coming from the subconscious mind into the conscious mind to trigger the chemical body, which is the emotion, the feeling, the gauge of our human suit, to then trigger so that we can see how to engage more. And so being in tune more with the thought processes help to gauge the emotional body, because the thoughts are the programming, and how we respond is the emotional reaction, which are the triggers. And so when we slow down the thought processes to clear out the space, we can become much more dialed in and much more engaged with the triggers, the emotional responses in the body. I find that when we get outside of the whole concept of feeling this heavy trauma and being in the light of being a victim of the past, and it's not even about being a victim, it's about a shift in awareness. When there's a shift in perception of what's happened to us and where we're really living in the now, it changes the thought process to see things from a different level, way outside of the human psyche, because everything is energy. And we are, the soul is hosted in this vessel to have the experience, to use the body as the gauging mechanism of the compass. Energy gets pulled from us through the ether, the ley lines in which we travel to different states and different countries, and also the ley lines in our thought processes. When we realize that the programming of the outside world isn't necessarily what matches the inside world, we then can begin separating and recognizing all of these different patterns of existing. Slowing it down, realizing that the hurt and the pain is simply a chemical reaction from the programmed past, from a story that happened to us once, which is no longer present. And if some of us are living in a situation where this is going on right now, if your emotional body is triggering pain in your psyche and you're recycling that thought processes back into the pain body and it's not evolving, this is a perfect time to step outside of all of that, to take a look from an outside perspective, as if you were giving someone else advice. What would I tell someone else if they were going through this situation from me? And really, it's about recognizing. It's about shifting the perception to see that fear is the tool for us to engage, to ascend into higher vibration. Just like love, it's our innate nature. It comes from the heart, yet it produces a feeling when we engage into it. So a lot of people say, well, I may not know how to love myself, or I may not know how to love others. And it's because you're so stuck up here in the mind. When the mind gets moved out of the way and we can tune into the heart to show ourselves compassion, to show ourselves self-love, which is understanding, we can then start to shift the reality of perception. And then the stories begin to change, and the emotional body begins to heal the wounds from the past. Because realizing that it is all a thought, it is all a thought, all based on experiences. Some people are really tuned into the programming that's running. And I look at it, I look at the psyche and the outer world as a reflection, as within, so without, as above, so below. If you are, traveling through your outer world and you're feeling a lot of distortion in your job, you're feeling a lot of distortion with the people in your home or your close friends, you're feeling a lot of distortion in your own psyche, unable to truly connect to your heart process, that's when it's time to stop for a second, get internal, and to realize that there's something from within. It's not the world doing it to you. The world is a reflection of you. And so when we can slow down to recognize that there is a reflection taking place from within, and every person we come in contact with, everything that we experienced even as a child is a reflection of that. I posted a meme not too long ago that I found and I really loved. And it said, the only toxic relationship I've ever had in my life was with myself. And I posted it in a couple of different places. And in my group, Guide to Ascension, a lady posted on there something about childhood. And in my frame of perception, I hadn't thought about the toxic relationships that we are involved in as a child. So I sat with that and I thought about it. And then it took me back to the Hawaiian mantra of Ho'oponopono, which is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And that's it. And what Ho'oponopono is that it is the recognition that if something comes in front of us, then that is a reflection of us somewhere. So then it's at that moment we can stop and go into the Ho'oponopono prayer to release that, whatever it is. And then it doesn't become personal. There isn't blame being placed on anyone. We aren't feeling guilt within our own psyche of feeling things in a certain way. And so whenever the lady commented on my post about the only toxic relationship we ever had is with ourselves, revolved around childhood, I went to Ho'oponopono and I thought of that, and I thought, well, I understand what she's saying, because when we're a child and we're growing up with these parents or step parents or grandparents or whomever is the guardian of our psyche at that age, it's easy to recognize for me that those experiences were part of my personal path, or I wouldn't be involved in it. Even as a child, even the sexual misconduct, even the physical violence, even the mental terrorism, all of those things revolves around my own personal experience here on earth. It doesn't make it right or wrong, because there is no good or bad. It's simply a shift of perception. No, those things did not feel good to me as a child. Yet in some way, I even then recognized that this is not me. This was their programming. This was my parents' programming. Yet as I got older, I began to recognize that that was part of my programming too. It was part of my ascension process to learn those lessons of self-love. And therefore, I transmuted that energy to become something of power for me, something of a lesson of learning to recognize certain patterns, not to repeat that same ancestral past, because it all is generational. I recognized by looking at my grandparents that my parents didn't know what they were doing either, because my grandparents didn't know what they were doing. All they knew is what they knew in the moment, and they did the best that they could. And so toxicity, we get, like, words have such value and they have such meaning, and we can really embrace the words of others and take on what it is that they're saying without even looking into our own self to gauge our own perception. And that's why I feel like it's really important. You may not agree with the things that I say, and I'm not inviting you to agree or not agree. I look at it as sharing an outer view of perception, of the emotional body, of the wounded body that we experience. And then the amazing thing about realizing emotion and how it triggers in our own physical vessel on a proton, electron, cellular level, we can then begin to understand other people. And really, honestly, we get to learn about ourselves, but the rest of the time here on Earth, I feel it's really about gauging other people's energy and seeing how it merges with our own. Because we are here existing with over 8 billion people that are running their own programs, their own experiences through their own programming as a child of how the parents and the grandparents spoke to them or not spoke to them. And so when we realize that even from childhood, we really didn't have great guidance. Some of you may have. Me personally, I was guided on what not to do, which was very helpful for me as I've gotten older. Therefore, it's all divine. And so I've been able to recharge my own emotional body so that it doesn't trigger my thought processes and vice versa. I'm learning to work with my own thought processes to create a better energetic feeling in my physical vessel so that I can have a healthy experience as a human here on Earth. Because a lot of medical issues come from the emotional status of the human psyche and how those chemical reactions transmute into the cells, which causes disease, fibromyalgia, depression, all kinds of things comes from emotional problems. Thyroid issues, breast cancer, all sorts of things can come from emotional damage. And so when we can recognize that we can literally heal ourselves on a cellular level through our thought processes, that's empowerment. And then it doesn't become about this emotional experience as a human and woe is me, and it can get so heavy. Because on the bright side of things, everything is vibration. And we get to make the choice to a huge degree on what we get to accept in here. Because there's a tape rolling. There's a video and a tape rolling that feeds the human mind information that's been stored in there. One of the things I've also come to understand is that the subconscious mind doesn't understand the feeling. That is in the body. And so something may pop up in your mind that makes your body not feel good, which triggers a sad emotion in you. And that's because of the programming that you've experienced. Therefore, by recognizing that the sadness that you feel from a thought can be transmuted into a higher vibration, by recognizing that the thought is just programming. The thought is programming from an experience as was happened once, which triggered an emotional response to the body, which was then stored in a chemical way. You can study and research fight or flight and understand what that means. It's a literal trigger response in the body, in the solar plexus, which then affects the heart. The neurotransmitters in the stomach and the brain start peaking at all these different levels. Serotonin spike, or dopamine spikes, serotonin goes down, oxytocin gets all out of whack, and then it becomes distorted, and then the human mind can't think anymore. And then there's an emotional release of crying or anger, and we get to come back around full circle. So there is this cycle that happens. And it's really amazing to step outside of oneself, outside of the stories, to realize, wow, it is something much greater than this whole pain experience. And that means that we become vulnerable. The word vulnerable has gotten an interesting energetic response in this life. Vulnerability means, that we have to become less than. And actually, it doesn't. Vulnerability means the power of love. It means the ability to be able to move past fear, to open the heart space, to let the mind engage here. It's the surrenderance of the unaligned ego that's been programmed by fear and pain and situations that didn't feel good to our humanistic experience. That's the power. And all it takes is the human to decide that they want to surrender this thing that they've been holding on to inside that they didn't really know what it was. And that's okay, because we don't know. We don't know. Most of us are not taught this stuff as a child, you know? I mean, I wasn't shown a lot of love. I wasn't shown a lot of affection when I was a child. So, of course, my innate nature is to love. So I was hunting that out in so many ways that became really dysfunctional through sex and, multiple relationships with people that weren't in my highest good in my own mind, because I wasn't tapped into my own highest good. So I was mirroring my lack of self-love because there was simply a lack of awareness. That's it. It's not even as heavy as the human likes to think it is. It literally is, because there isn't enough information to give the human higher awareness so that there can be more emotional, which is feeling success and health in the body. That's why the Toltecs, in the book called The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz, talks about the physical body. When the human turns its perception into the physical body and begins to love and listen to the physical body, everything else begins to shine. Because when we look at our body and we pay attention and listen, we're listening to our mind, which is coming through the heart process. If you tell yourself that you're fat, if you tell yourself that you're too skinny, if you tell yourself that you need to lose weight, you're stuck in a trap of the subconscious mind. If you tell yourself, I love my body, I am becoming more healthier, I am making better health choices to eat, I am going to research the best nutrition for my brain, for my gut, for my neurotransmitters, for my heart, for my veins, for my blood, that's taking the power back. That is creating a different frequency of transmitting light within our own selves. If someone says, oh, I don't really like my hair, or I don't like my face, or I don't like my skin, all of these things are programming in the subconscious mind. So then when you're walking around and you see someone else, that thought's going to come back up and it's going to trigger an emotional response in the body. And then you're going to start throwing negative energy towards someone because you want to look like them. Like these little modes of conversation that we have in our mind when we are jealous of someone else's success, when we compare ourselves to how someone looks because we feel like we should look that way so that we're more accepted in society. All of these things are a vibration in the physical vessel. And so it's like, oh, like I've been told, Lori, you get so technical with the thought processes and we can think anything we want. And it's like, sure, you can think whatever you want. That's fine. And at the end of the day, it's a vibration that you're putting off within your own psyche. It doesn't feel good. Now, the body gets programmed in all kinds of ways. So just like with drugs, if you use drugs in that moment, you feel a chemical release. You feel this amazing high that happens. Well, it's the same way in the physical body. When the physical body has been programmed by negative or lower vibrational thought processes. If you're walking down the street and you don't like the way that you look, you don't like the clothes that you have on, things like that, and then you see a group of people and they look real stylish and their hair's all done up, and you automatically will have this response of jealousy or something that comes in. Well, that is going to satisfy that human in a neurological high for a very brief amount of time, because it's literally going to explode a chemical response in the body to justify the thought that the person just had, because the programming has been there. Like, it literally works down to this really divine mechanism in the body of flow. And so instead of having those feelings, if we can use the things that we say we don't like as power to fuel what we want to create in our lives, that's when we start to transmute energy into alchemy. And our vibration and our auric field literally starts to change. And so there is these little things. And it's not to say that they're not going to come up. I still have things that pop up into my psyche. I have things that pop up into my psyche, and I'm quickly reminded that that's not my authentic self. It's because there's a lack of something within me, and or it's programming from the past. So I'm able to transmit that frequency really quickly, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I'm not jealous. Oh yeah, because I'm not envious. It's because I'm doing my own thing and learning my own rhythm. And I love this person, and I love the way they look, and I'm getting inspiration from them in any way that I can. Or just to not care at all. I mean, we don't have to put so much energy of feeling onto everything in this life. It's okay to be in the void and not having to feel things at times, because that's the quiet space. Happiness, sadness, all of those things are a choice, and they're also an innate choice that comes from the programming within the psyche. Also, not only is our emotional response taking place within our own body, it also takes place when we're engaging with other people. That's also a method of absorption of energy, which programs the psyche, which then programs the emotional body, which is the feeling. And so when talking to someone or going to open up the space to talk to someone about something that may not feel great, or to process emotions with someone that comes from pain, it's important to be mindful of how to step into that conversation before it actually takes place. For me personally, I like to do a little bit of mind meditation, which is just sitting with myself, thinking about how I'm going to engage, how I'm going to open the door into that conversation with that person, and to make sure that my energy is at a balanced state, that I'm not coming into it from a triggered perspective of pointing fingers and placing blame. And it helps so much to step into an arena of someone else's thought processes with compassion is the true way to really be able to receive someone else, and so that they can receive you. It's this beautiful romance, this beautiful dance. I almost said romance, but because it is in an essence. It's a beautiful dance with the psyche, to be able to really be in tune with oneself, to engage in such a way that's inviting, to allow people to step into your sacred space, because you are the one in control of that to some degree. And so I find whenever I'm going to start a conversation with someone, especially my own self, right? How we talk to ourselves is the love language and what we speak without. I find that it's good to ask the person, hey, I'd like to talk about something with you really quick on a deeper level. Are you open to that right now? And let the person decide. Let them tell you. They're going to give you the answer. And if they don't want to hear you, then it's up to you how to deal with your own egoic spectrum programming around that conversation. They may not be ready to receive you at that moment. They may not be ready to receive you at all. And so fighting with someone else's psyche to get them to understand you because you want it so much is understandable. Yet at the same time, it's not going to, the vibration can get really distorted and cause more wounds to the emotional body, which is already existing. So let's see, Willis just asked me about ancestral programming, past life, future programming. Yes, ancestral programming is the programming that is passed down generationally. Great-grandparents to grandparents to parents to children. So there's this ancestral cycle that happens with consciousness. And most of the time, humans aren't aware that this is taking place. And it's not until we get older, at least for me, I started noticing it when I was a child, that things just weren't right here. You know, like I knew that I didn't belong in that situation and in that town, in that city, in that state, just all this stuff. I began to have those awarenesses when I was younger. And so I got pulled out of my parental situation at a young age energetically to be able to get out of the path of all of that. And I realized that the generational trauma, or the lack of self-awareness, is passed down from generation to generation. And so when it comes to healing the ancestral lineage, that means that the human takes responsibility for a change of its own reaction in its mind to realize that it's all programs, that it's all based on what someone else has told us, or what we've seen from other people, until we decide to start the programming ourselves. If something doesn't feel too good to you intuitively, it doesn't mean it's bad or good. It just means you felt a vibration to stop and take a look at. In this life, the human body is the gauge. It is the compass of the psyche, the feeling through the chemical reaction in the body to the mind. And so just because something comes into the solar plexus, the body doesn't know whether it's good or bad. It just knows that there's a vibration. There's a vibration to pause. So if you move past the feeling that you receive in your solar plexus, in your body, without paying attention to it, then that is stepping in the realm of program, of the subconscious mind. So me, part of my mastery is I'm dialed into my feels more and more every day. I recognize when I feel something, that's like, ooh, okay. It doesn't mean the other person's making me feel it. It means that I'm feeling something based on something that's triggering in my own psyche and my own emotional body, which is causing me to feel something. And then there's this whole mastery that starts to take place. Then it doesn't become someone else's fault. And we can step outside of the roles of being a victim and things like that, because really everything is energy, and it tugs and pulls and programs the psyche. and life becomes easier. It doesn't become heavier. And then we can share our feelings and our minds in a more aligned, authentic manner and help other people to see their true value, and especially the children. Take the time to explain things to children versus saying, I told you so, like I talked about in the beginning of this video. I told you so, or because I said so, doesn't give information. Therefore, the psyche of that child or that adult doesn't know what to do with that information. They don't understand. So it's like walking around with a compass that isn't properly gauging right. I feel like we're such influential beings on this planet Earth. We're here influencing each other every step of the moment. I'm influencing your minds right now. You're influencing my minds right now because we're sending energy back and forth. All the billboards you read on the side of the road, all the commercials you watch on TV and listen to on the radio, all the foods you eat, all the books you read, everything is a program, and it's influencing your psyche. So it's all about the emotional response we choose to have to those things so that then we make these agreements or not. It's really simple when we get outside of the human emotional wounded body to recognize the programming and how it works in our molecular structure, because this isn't just a body. This is a mechanism, an antenna signal of mastery. It's really beautiful. The gravity field in which we are in is a magnificent thing, and because there is gravity, it requires balance. If not, we'd be all floating around. So when we think about it this way, we can work with the gravitational pull of the Earth's atmosphere to become more grounded, because we are receiving so much energy on a daily basis from everything around us. Everything is influential. Everything is a feeling. I love you to the moon. It's all about self-empowerment. Healing the solar plexus to be able to engage in the throat chakra, to really be able to speak our minds and our hearts properly. This is our antenna mechanism of attraction. Here, here, and here. The chakra system and the organs in the body all have this beautiful, divine, magnificent rhythm of our creation. And when we get dialed in and tuned into our body, that's when we really begin to flow in love. I love you to the moon. Keep blessing it up out there, family. Sending all my love up to Mauna Kea and everyone up there holding it down for the preservation of the volcano. Love and light. Peace and happiness.